Stock. I'm a journalist with a fairly long track record with film. I'm also a novelist, and I am a former curator of the Bridport From Page to Screen Festival.
Well, fantastic. It's a pleasure to meet you, Francine. Thank you. And thank you. So to start off, I kind of want to just go to the beginnings and the roots of how you got into journalism. So what was it that kind of pushed you or inspired you to get into like the journalism industry?
Well, I'd always been interested, even from school to a bit, and then right the way through university, I did some student journalism as well. So I actually worked in print first before I joined the BBC. Then I worked in current affairs, mainly the BBC, for a few years. And after that, I switched over to doing more art stuff, which was also coincided with my starting to write, which I'd always wanted to do, but never really quite had the confidence to do.
Oh, that's amazing. And if I'm right with the BBC, you joined in around about 1983, if I'm correct.
A long time ago. Yes, I did.
If it's okay, is there any kind of parts of working at the BBC that were like your favourites? Was there anything particularly you liked the most?
I had a terrific number of years from the late 80s onwards when I worked mainly on Newsnight, the current affairs programme, and spent a lot of time travelling. I mean, my brief was really to get on planes quite a lot and go to fascinating areas. So we're talking about the fall of the Soviet Union, we're talking about that whole era. I was also in Brazil. There was issues around kind of debt and that. So I actually loved going abroad and working abroad. I did domestic politics as well, but to be honest, my true love was really reporting from abroad.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's incredible. Is there like a specific story you remember from the time which was like, that was a really amazing experience?
I think it was a real privilege to be in the then Soviet Union as the various nationalist movements arose. I mean, you look at it now with hindsight, and of course there are terrible ironies in this. So, for example, being in Ukraine in the late 80s and 1990, when there was already those tensions were there, but in a different form, and it wasn't as if CNN existed, but you didn't find global news crews everywhere, and you could still get to places where perhaps nobody had ever spoken to a television reporter before. They did sometimes mean that if you asked them a question, their answers would be 4 minutes long. But that was better than a kind of soundbite mentality, and I felt a huge privilege actually to bring those stories to a wider audience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It must have felt kind of like you say, a privilege and honour to be able to, because I imagine those stories probably didn't get shared to a wider audience until you went out there and got the chance to.
No, and I think there was a sense at that point that that news wasn't quite as kind of commodified and as it is now. So it wasn't that you would necessarily see the same people across all the networks, or you could still find individual. And also, to be fair, the BBC was prepared to send you out to find things as well, not just to follow stories.
That sounds absolutely incredible. Obviously, you mentioned as well that you are a novelist and you've written books. Where were you able to kind of start getting into that? Was this more later into your career, or was this earlier on?
I wanted right from the outset to write fiction, but then there was not enough time, and I think possibly I didn't really have the confidence probably to do it as well. And then I had a little bit of time off. I was actually ill, and I was in hospital for a while. And I thought, well, might as well have a go now. And I was very lucky in that my first novel did really quite well, and that sort of gave me the confidence to go on after that, although I've also written non-fiction as well.
Oh, fantastic. What non-fictions have you written, if you don't mind me asking?
I've written a book about film called Inglorious Technicolor, which is about, it's a sort of social history of film, so it's a century of film and how it's shaped us, and it's the way that film has fed into our politics, it's even fed into our understanding of the psyche, it's fed into the way people respond to crises, it's just... It's trying to sort of unpick some of that, but it takes a series of films over the decades demonstrating how they wove in and out of current affairs.
This is a personal question just for me. Where can I find that book? It sounds like you've sold it to me. I'm sold.
You can get it very, very cheap secondhand online.
Oh, wow. Yeah, wow.
Very cheap indeed.
Yeah,
Second-hand bookshops have it as well.
Of course, I'm going to make sure to read that as soon as this is done. Wow. Obviously, going on from film, we're at the From Page to Screen Festival right now, which you were the curator of back in 2012. What was that experience like, kind of curating an entire film festival, really?
Oh, fascinating. I mean, the whole process, of course, the selection is always the difficult thing because you start to think on a theme and then suddenly tens and dozens and scores of films come to you as ideas. And so just narrowing it down and also making it so that each day is kind of balanced, that you've got a bit of this, but then there may be enough over the week to make sure that there's a kind of theme emerging as well, and also coordinating to see whether directors or stars or whatever are available to come down. I was so beautifully supported by everybody in the Bridport team, and it was just a thoroughly positive experience.
Yeah, wow, I mean, just kind of like exploring the festival in the couple of days we've been here, it seems like just an amazing chance to not only get a chance to obviously show films that you're passionate about, but get a chance to kind of almost put your character out there in the films that you choose. And going on from there, obviously, we saw you do that amazing introduction for Letters for an Unknown Woman. And going from curating the films to being a guest here, how has that differed, being on that different perspective of the festival?
Well, it's also a delight, but in a completely different way. I mean, I have a huge regard for Christopher Hampton and everything that he's achieved over the years, and I think his choice of films is really interesting too, and I'm really looking forward to talking to him about the whole process of screenwriting, and also particularly about the close relationship between being a stage dramatist and a dramatist for screen. And so I think that is an interesting area, because actually, you know, we carry on having more literary adaptations and stage adaptations as time goes on. You would imagine that as film developed, there would be more original screenplays, but in fact, adaptations are still very much the thing that will sell a film.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like it's become even more of the lifeblood of film than it's ever been. And I mean, I've appreciated as well with seeing stage to screen adaptations becoming more and more creative, and because there's a charm in doing it very traditional and doing it as true to the stage as possible. But stage and screen are obviously so different that translating it for film, I almost appreciate how people are willing to take more creative risk with it in these days. And finally, obviously, going on from the future, because I'm very excited to obviously watch your discussion tomorrow. But going on from there, what's the future for Francine Stock? Have you got anything in the pipeline? Or?
Well, in the pipeline, I have a novel at the moment, which is that I'm working on, and my agent very wisely has I have to keep at it. So I've got some deadlines. So that's really taking up quite a bit of my time at the moment, but I still do bits and pieces about film, and we're still doing quite a lot of stage events and interviews and that kind of thing. I'm still watching a lot of film.
Oh, that's amazing. If you don't mind me asking another personal question, have there been any films you've watched recently that have really sat with you?
Oh gosh, now my mind's going
Of course.
right. Oh God, what have I liked recently? Oh God, remind me of things that have been big recently.
Tar.
Oh yeah. I like Tar. I know it's quite divisive, yes. And interestingly, I think it might be slightly generationally divisive as well, because I've heard a lot of young people think that it's just terminally pretentious. But I think it's one of the funniest films I've seen. I think it's just hilarious. A really dark comedy, and I think the force that is Cate Blanchett is employed to fantastic effect.
I would argue it could be a career-defining performance. I absolutely love it. It's great to see that you enjoyed Tar, because I loved it as well. A fantastic film, absolutely.
And I have overheard people with quite the reverse. But there we are.
Just as a last question to wrap this up as well, is there one piece of advice that you would give to the new generation of, say, young journalists that want to get into journalism but don't know really where to start?
I think it's something that's really important. And when people say, I want to be a television presenter, or I want to be... You have to have something to say. Yeah. You have to have... it's not enough to say, I think I'd be really good on TV or radio or whatever it is. It doesn't really work like that. The people who have lasting careers are the people whose genuine interest in the subject comes over. I mean, as a as a television or radio presenter, you are a conduit to allow other people to say things. And I think it's having that kind of absorption, that proper interest, and also maybe developing a few areas of expertise. You know, I know a bit about this, or whatever. Those kind of things really help, rather than just saying generically, I think I'd be good on TV.
Yes.